Hello there, and welcome once again to RWR Plays TEW 2020. And today we bring you the WCW Nitro after the Great American Bash. This is chapter 10 of our series, and we're getting through these pretty quickly. And I feel like the series has really picked up, really since chapter 4 for me. I think the first couple of shows, the WCW Nitro and the Big Bang, were really low key, and that was really just to get everyone positioned in the right place in the series. And then since then I think we've been in a much better place, and I really enjoyed booking the 5 episodes of Nitro building up to the Great American Bash and then bringing you the Great American Bash. Well, today we begin the road to Bash at the Beach, which is our next pay-per-view in 4 weeks time. Just quickly before we go to today's show, a recap of what took place at the Great American Bash, and this will be actually in some ways this is the opening segment of Nitro, because the opening segment of Nitro is a recap of the Great American Bash. So the key highlights that I would put in that video that kind of recaps the Great American Bash is, first of all, Kidman and Rey Mysterio Jr. retaining the Cruiserweight Tag Team titles versus 3 Count. Then Bam Bam Bigelow being revealed as the real opponent for Tommy Dreamer and beating him with Canyon's help, and seemingly an alliance forming between Bigelow and Canyon. Totally Buff retaining the heavyweight tag team title versus Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo. Vampiro defeating Hugh Morris and then afterwards telling him why he lost, and that he lost because he doesn't know himself. The franchise players defeated Goldberg and Air Raid when Douglas pinned Air Paris. Mike Awesome low-blowing Kevin Nash en route to retaining the United States title. DDP being revealed as the 4th member of Sting's team for the War Games match, and then Kurt Hennig pinning Ric Flair in that War Games match for Team Sting to get the victory, and thus bringing the end to the Magnificent Seven. And of course, on the screen right now you'll see a legacy of my mistake in that booking of that show, because I had Stevie Ray in the match instead of DDP in the game. Ignore that, it was DDP in the match. So what we're going to do now is go to Nitro and bring you all of the happenings from the night after the Great American Bash. And what I will say is I think this is so far the most detailed show I have got in terms of the notes I've got in front of me to go through as we bring you the show. So potentially, I wonder if that's a sign of things to come as we go through. I think there will be more detail and more story packed into stuff because we've got more history to work with, in terms of going forward. So yeah, anyway, here comes Nitro. And you'll see there we are in Club Nokia, or Club Nokia. I guess probably it is the an arena sponsored by Nokia, I suppose, the phone company. I don't know. But anyway, it's in California, and 2,094 people are here for Nitro, which is, I think, our biggest crowd for a Nitro so far. But we're back in the Southwest as opposed to being in the Southeast where we were for the Great American Bash. And the first of 2 dark matches on the show. First of all, Rey Mysterio Jr. defeating Elix Skipper in 9:55 by pinfall. This was segment rating of 61. A good pre-show match. Rey Mysterio getting the victory. A 74 for Rey Mysterio and Elix Skipper a 31. Again, this is just we haven't got anything for them on Nitro, so we thought we may as well use them before the show. And then also a 6-man tag match, which sees Jim Duggan, Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo against The Wall, Mark Jindrak and Sean Stasiak. And this is won in 8 minutes 15 seconds when Sean O'Haire pins The Wall for his team. Segment rating of 49. Sean O'Haire looking pretty good there, 53. And Chuck Palumbo not bad either, 49. Jim Duggan still pretty decent, 45. Their opponents, on the other hand, not so great. And we haven't used them anywhere near as much, so it's not really a surprise. So going into the show proper, and as I said before we got into the show, we start with a video which recaps everything that took place from the Great American Bash. I'm not going to go over it again, but this one got a segment rating of 67, and kind of just recapped everything that took place the night before for those that didn't purchase it on pay-per-view. Then we get Mike Tenay and Jerry the King Lawler previewing Nitro, and it begins with Taylor Then we get Tenay and Jerry Lawler previewing Nitro, and it begins with Mike Tenay revealing that WCW Championship Committee and Eric Bischoff have been busy since the Great American Bash last night. They have decided that Shane Douglas is the new #1 contender to the WCW World Title after getting a pinfall victory over Goldberg at the Big Bang and being undefeated since WCW's relaunch, and he will face Booker T at Bash at the Beach. They then also say that the WCW Championship Committee have sanctioned an 8-team tag team tournament to determine the next contenders to Totally Buff's tag team belts. Tenay and Lawler also talk about the fact that Sting has been given a week off to rest up injuries, and Booker T is also not in the building tonight as he is in the hospital with his brother, but will be joining them via phone call live later in the show. They also promised that the other two members of the victorious War Games team will be here tonight, as Tony Schiavone is due to talk to both Kurt Hennig and DDP. And they also then, of course, announce or remind everyone that tonight the Cruiserweight title is on the line as Shane Helms defends against the Great Sasuke. And not only that, but Scott Steiner will be addressing the rest of the Magnificent Seven as they come to terms with the end of that faction. So lots to pack in here. Segment rating of 54. One thing I wanted to note, and I've realised this quite quickly, is that I am a big fiend for tournaments. They really help booking a lot. They make booking very, very easy. But I do like them, and I think that they give purpose to lots of matches, and I like there to be a purpose for matches in general where I can find it. So yeah, you're probably gonna see a lot of tournaments. I'm gonna try and avoid them after this tag team tournament for a month or two, but yeah, tournaments will probably be quite a big part of the way I book. And yeah, right off the bat here, first episode of Nitro after the Great American Bash, we've also already got our main event effectively for the Bash at the Beach announced, as Booker T will defend the WCW title against Shane Douglas, and we have kind of introduced everybody to the tag team tournament that's going to take place over the next couple of weeks. After this, the first match of the night sees Hugh Morris take on Mike Sanders in an bout that had good heat and decent wrestling. Hugh Morris defeated Mike Sanders in 7:58 by pinfall. And what takes place here is that shortly into the match, Vampiro walks to the ring and observes from ringside, halfway through removing the top turnbuckle pad in one of the corners. Shortly before the end of the match, however, he walks away. Morris then eventually wins by using the exposed turnbuckle and getting the victory. Segment rating of 53 here. Mike Sanders is the sacrificial lamb to give Hugh Morris, who we wanted to give a victory to, and this continues the strange storyline between Hugh Morris and Vampiro. Next up, the first interview segment of the night is Tony Schiavone welcomes Chavo Guerrero Jr. to speak to him, and Tony Schiavone says that Chavo will surely be watching on with interest to see the Cruiserweight title match later tonight. And Chavo says that it's a disgrace that Sasuke has been in WCW only a matter of weeks and has been handed a title shot by Shane Helms so early without truly earning it. Segment rating of 35 here. Just a little bit of fluff as we go ahead of the next match, which is another match in the women's title round robin. This one won by Alexis Lurie by defeating Amber O'Neil in 4:47 by submission. And a segment rating of 7. The segment ratings here are still not really going anywhere. I think this is because both of these people are still considered relatively unimportant to the crowd. So as I said, it might take some time for these matches to get anywhere, but that's fine. As I said, it's only taking up a few minutes on each show. We're not exactly basing a huge amount of importance on them at the moment. It's just to introduce all these women to the crowd and get their overall popularity across the United States and the world up a little bit, so that when later on their matches can actually mean something. Next, out comes Shane Douglas. He's introduced by Tony Schiavone in the ring. Shane Douglas comes out, and Schiavone asks Douglas how the franchise players beat Goldberg in Air Raid last night. Douglas says that Schiavone needs to brush up on his interview technique because there's far bigger news about the franchise than him getting his second win over Bill Goldberg in 2 months, and that's that he has been named the #1 contender to the WCW World Title. Douglas continues that he has nothing to prove to Goldberg. He's beaten him 1-2-3 in the middle of the ring, and Goldberg is simply a footnote in his past. But the WCW title is his future, and that's all he's focusing on now. Douglas, however, is then interrupted by Goldberg coming out in front of the crowd. So segment rating here of 62. Shane Douglas was really good within the match, and this continued Shane Douglas and Bill Goldberg's feud as Shane Douglas prepares for his world title match against Booker T. Goldberg comes to the ring, and before Goldberg can get to the ring, Douglas escapes and runs away through the crowd. This time, Goldberg takes the microphone away from Tony Schiavone and tells Shane Douglas they're not done by a long shot. So a segment rating here of 61, and just a continuation of Goldberg and Shane Douglas's feud. Next up, a little bit of match filler really. Conan defeats Chris Harris in 6 minutes and 17 seconds by submission. Segment rating of 58, so this was a good match, and Conan looked really good in the match. 62, Chris Harris at 27. Still haven't really figured out what I'm doing with Conan yet, and I think at some point we're going to have to make a decision about whether we're going to use him regularly or let him go. But I think given the in-ring performance he's shown in some of the matches, I think he's well worth using. So I'm going to have to give that a good think in the next couple of weeks. Next up is the first match in the tag title #1 contenders tournament. Team Canada have defeated Ernest Miller and Ice Train in 9:54 when Lance Storm pins Ernest Miller. You can see here Ice Train was the weak link, struggling to keep up with everyone else's in-ring performance. Only a segment rating of 49 despite both Lance Storm and Mike Awesome performing really well. Ernest Miller wasn't bad, but Ice Train obviously really dragged this match down. But Team Canada are the first team to advance to the semi-finals of the tag title tournament. Next up, backstage, Tony Schiavone welcomes his guest at this time, War Games winners Kurt Hennig and Diamond Dallas Page. Tony Schiavone asks Hennig how it feels to get the winning fall in the match at Great American Bash. He says that since he returned to WCW, he's been trying to get some revenge on Ric Flair, and last night he did it. Schiavone asks Diamond Dallas Page how it came to be that he became the fourth member of the team, and DDP says that with Stevie Ray out, Sting reached out to him to join them, and he wanted rid of the Magnificent Seven as much as anybody in WCW, so it was an easy decision to make. Schiavone then congratulates them both as this segment ends. So a segment rating here of 68, Kurt Hennig and DDP pretty good, but Tony Schiavone didn't perform particularly well, but I'm happy with Tony Schiavone in this role. I think it gives him something to do, and he's not bad, he's just not always as good as the people he's interviewing, which is fair enough, really. Next up, we have a match between Johnny the Bull and Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett wins in 9 minutes and 25 seconds by pinfall. A segment rating of 60. Jarrett was really good here, 71. Johnny the Bull only a 24. The two have great chemistry as well, so that improved the match overall quality. And Jeff Jarrett came out of it looking good. A clean victory for Jarrett. After the match, the FBI debut. So James Maritato and what we're calling Tony Cicero, because we have obviously Johnny Bull was part of the Mamalukes tag team, so calling him Tony Mamaluke just doesn't seem to track for me somehow. Anyway, James Maritato and Tony Cicero debut. Maritato grabs a microphone and tells Johnny the Bull that the family have been watching and they're not happy with Johnny. They say he's lost all his matches since WCW relaunched, and even lost Big Vito, who's been missing ever since. Maritato says that the family are worried that Vito has gone into the witness protection program and ratted them all out. He says that they've been sent to WCW to sort out the mess that Johnny the Bull has made. So in come James Maritato and Tony Cicero. Segment rating of 19 here, so not exactly a great segment at all, but both the full-blooded Italian gimmicks have got an initial rating of very good or great, and this is the arrival of the FBI, and it's kind of, I brought these two in because they're really good wrestlers, and also they can be added to our Cruiserweight Tag Team division, but also it just felt like the right place to introduce them with Johnny the Bull, given their kind of similar gimmicks in general. Next up, we have the Cruiserweight title match, and in a decent match, Shane Helms drew with Great Sasuke in 14 minutes and 19 seconds when the match descended into chaos. And what happens here is that they're both fighting hard in a back and forth match, but Chavo Guerrero comes out with a chair and hits both of them with the chair to end the match in a no contest. And segment rating of 45, both Shane Helms and Great Sasuke were better than that, but because they're both baby faces, the match suffered just a little bit from a heat perspective. But the Cruiserweight title storyline has, of course, advanced with this segment, and Shane Helms keeps his Cruiserweight title for now. And that's good to see that Shane Helms and Great Sasuke have pretty good chemistry as well. That's an extra bonus there. So next we are back at the announce desk with Mike Tenay and Jerry Lawler, and they receive the phone call from Booker T as arranged. Mike Tenay announces that he has just been sent word that the franchise players will be booked in 3 separate singles matches next week on Nitro. Firstly, Brian Clark will face Air Paris, Shane Douglas will take on AJ Styles, and Bill Goldberg will battle Bryan Adams. Then Booker T phones in, and Tenay asks Booker T how his brother is doing. Booker T responds by saying that the doctors have told Stevie that he has wrestled his last match. Tenay shares his best wishes to Stevie and then asks Booker how he feels about the win at War Games. Booker T says it's kind of a bittersweet victory because he's glad they won and the Magnificent Seven is no more, but he's mainly just angry, and says that Scott Steiner was the ringleader behind the attack on his brother, and so he's got to pay for what he did. Tenay and Lawler thank Booker T for his time, and the segment ends. So yeah, a couple of things here. Obviously, Mike Tenay announcing what's going to happen on Nitro next week. 3 matches in one announcement. Brian Clark versus Air Paris, Shane Douglas versus AJ Styles, and Bill Goldberg against Bryan Adams. And then we had the Booker T phone in as well. Then we go to our main event match. It is the second quarterfinal in the Tag Team Title No. 1 Contenders Tournament. It sees the Insiders versus Bam Bam Bigelow and Kanyon, who came together last night, of course, at the Great American Bash. The Insiders defeat Bigelow and Kanyon in 16 minutes and 28 seconds when DDP pins Bam Bam Bigelow. During the match, we also had Tommy Dreamer distract Kanyon. So what happens here is that Tommy Dreamer comes out in the middle of the match and Kanyon jumps off the apron to confront Dreamer. The pair stand in the aisle while arguing as officials keep them apart, but meanwhile in the ring, DDP hits a diamond cutter on Bam Bam Bigelow, and Kanyon realizes too late to prevent DDP from getting the pin. Segment rating of 64, DDP and Kevin Nash 68 and 75, Kanyon with a 60 and Bigelow 53. He's not quite on the same level as the others, especially given that his popularity is a little bit lower than theirs, but this was just a way of kind of getting the Insiders through the tournament and keeping the Dreamer versus Bigelow and Kanyon feud going for now. So the final segment of the show is Scott Steiner addressing the Magnificent Seven. We've got Scott Steiner, Rick Steiner, Jeff Jarrett, Road Warrior Animal, Buff Bagwell, Lex Luger, and Ric Flair all in the ring. Scott Steiner grabs a microphone and addresses each one separately. Firstly, he tells Road Warrior Animal that for the best part of 15 years, he and his brother Rick have been the rivals of Animal and his partner all over the world in tag team matches, but he says that the last 6 months have given him more respect for him than ever before, and he thanks him for his loyalty over that time. He then turns to Jeff Jarrett and tells Jarrett that he used to think that Jarrett was just a guy that got everything handed to him on a plate, whether by his father or because he was the chosen one, but he says Jarrett has proven to him that he deserves all the success he has had in his career and wishes him nothing but the best going forward. He then speaks to Buff Bagwell and Lex Luger. He says that he and his brother know a thing or two about tag team wrestling, and they both agree that Totally Buff are a great team and could well take their place alongside the greats before too long. He looks at his brother Rick Steiner and tells him that he doesn't have to tell him how much he means to him. He says they're brothers, and even when they've been at each other's throats, they've always had each other's back. He says that whatever the stipulations said at War Games, there ain't nobody going to tell him to disband from his own brother. Finally, he turns to Ric Flair. Steiner says that Flair deserves all the credit for being the cause of the downfall of the Magnificent Seven. He says Flair was the one who failed to keep his job as CEO in WCW, which was the only positive thing he brought to the group. He says that Flair was the one who fixed it so that he would get a world title shot against Booker T 1 week ago, like the selfish old bastard he's always been, and then proceeded to lose the match. He says Flair was the one who managed to piss off Kurt Hennig, meaning Hennig joined Sting's team at the War Games, and that Flair was the one who got himself pinned to cause them to finally lose last night. Flair looks angrily at Steiner as he continues. He tells Flair to get out of the ring before he's thrown out by the rest of the Magnificent Seven in what will be their last act as a group. Despite his anger, Flair didn't like his odds up against all 6 of his former stablemates, who by this point were all backing up Steiner ready to pounce, and so he gradually backs away and leaves the ring before walking back up the ramp alone. Steiner and the rest of the Magnificent Seven then raise their arms one last time as their music plays and the show fades to a close. So segment rating here of 58, and Scott Steiner came out of this looking excellent. Road Warrior Animal looked lost as per usual, to be honest. That tends to be how he looks in these segments. Not the most amazing segment, but a kind of a show closing segment and a way to close the book ultimately on the Magnificent Seven. This one with Scott Steiner kind of giving all of his former stablemates some credit, with the exception of Ric Flair, who kind of turned on and kind of had the rest of the Magnificent Seven also turn on at the same time. So that is the end of the show, and a show overall rating of 63. Probably our weakest episode of Nitro, perhaps other than the opening one we've done so far, but still increased our popularity pretty much everywhere, which is good news. A decent main event, the Insiders versus Bam Bigelow and Canyon in the tag team title #1 contender tournament, and some new developments in various different feuds and different stories that we've got going on at this moment in time. And so that's the show. And as I said, there were quite a lot of notes there, mainly for that last show closing promo, because I got to be honest, I kind of modeled it on a angle that I remember seeing in TNA, if you'll believe that. Back in like 2006, I think it was just after Team Canada had lost a match where it meant they had to disband, and Scott D'Amore did a similar sort of promo where he spoke about each of Team Canada with glowing kind of in glowing terms, and then turned to Eric Young and kind of basically had a go at him for a while. So I kind of liked that. I really liked it. So I've been trying to find a way to use it, and I thought this was a really good way to use it. And obviously that there'll be more on this storyline as we go through. In terms of the report, so show's been awesome. Reports are that show is awesome, so that's good. Again, we've increased our popularity, and Raw is War was another one that got fantastic rewards. Again, this one not as good as the previous one, but they main evented The Undertaker versus Kurt Angle versus Hulk Hogan was the main event of Raw. So again, I think you can see what I'm up against in terms of, you know, if I was ever wanting to go up against WWE, if that's going to happen, it's not going to happen for a number of years. So we just got to keep plugging away and doing what we're doing. That is all for today's chapter of this series. I'll be bringing you the next chapter in a few days' time. Of course, that will be the next episode of Nitro, and there's lots already booked for that show, including 2 more quarterfinals in the #1 contender tag team title tournament, and the 3 matches involving Shane Douglas and the franchise players, and Goldberg and Air Raid. Bringing all that to you next time. But until we get to that point, thank you for watching.